Okay, today's daf we're going to be learning is Sanhedrin Daf Kaf Daled. Today's daf is sponsored by Shulamith and Joel Cohn in loving memory of Bubby, Rebbetzin Esther Predmesky, whose yahrzeit is today, Asara B'Tevet. Today's daf is sponsored by the Hadran women of Long Island in honor of the birth of a grandson, son of Naomi and Donnie Weinberger, to our friend and co-learner Dina Rabinovich. May the entire family enjoy much nachat from the new arrival as he grows to the Torah and the daf, the kupa, and the masim tovim. May we all continue to celebrate smachot ad v'lidai. Wishing everyone a good fast. Okay, we're going to get started now with our daf. Quick review. I don't want to spend too much time, but it's very important to understand. And if you walked out confused yesterday's daf, not to worry. Everyone was confused about yesterday's daf, including the Amoraim, the Rishonim, the Achronim. It's a very confusing Gemara because it's unclear again what courts we're talking about. By what rights does a litigant have to cancel the witnesses of the other side? Isn't he Nogea Be'edut? Isn't that right? Everyone will do that and just cancel out witnesses. How can they, lack of respect for judges, we could just cancel judges, right? So the judges issue, we responded by saying, well, you can't cancel mumchim, specialists, to which that led the Gemara to the big question, which was, well, Eidim are like mumchim. So if Eidim are like mumchim, then, right, because again, an expert judge is what's an expert witness? Two witnesses is the best you could get for witnesses. So it's the same as mumchim, which means how can we possibly cancel witnesses? So we had 4 answers. We only had 3 so far. We're going to get to the 4th today. All rabbis from Israel. First, Reish Lakish, who said it actually means only 1 witness you can cancel. You can't cancel 2 witnesses. You can cancel when there's only 1 witness. Gemara said, well, if there's only 1 witness, right, it's canceled anyway. It's not useful. To which they explained, well, it's a case where the person accepts upon, the litigant said, I'll accept your 1 witness to act as 2. And then they had to differentiate, well, how is that different from the next Mishnah? We're going to get to that next Mishnah today, and we'll go back there. Then we have Rabbi Elazar, who came and said, oh, no, there's 2 witnesses. Of course, it said Edav, and it said Dayano was singular. Dayano was singular. Edav was plural. Can't possibly be that they would change the form when they really meant Edo is single. So basically, it's not that. And therefore, Rabbi Elazar says it must be. They're coming to cancel 2 witnesses. What's the case? How does he cancel them, though? It's not just him by himself, the litigant, but the litigant comes with another witness. And they claim that there's a problem with the aidim. Now, what kind of problem? They're nogea b'davar, right? In other words, at least the litigant is nogea b'davar. How can we accept the testimony? To which the first answer was Rabbi Elazar, who said, or the way we explain Rabbi Elazar, must be a pgam mishpacha. They were testifying about a family member, which then affected them indirect. Rabbi Meir thinks indirect is okay. The rabbis say not. That's the machlok. Chaim Ravdimi and quotes Rabbi Yochanan, and in a minute we're going to have Ravin who quotes Rabbi Yochanan saying something somewhat different. That there's 2 witnesses. There's 2 witnesses, but there's 2 groups of witnesses, or we think there will be 2 groups of witnesses. That's the thing. The litigant, the other litigant, not the one canceling, the other litigant said, I'm going to bring 2 sets of witnesses. At that point, can we claim that if the other litigant comes with another witness and knocks out 1 set of witnesses, can we say, tzarich levarer? When the person said, I'm bringing 2 groups, they obviously meant to bring 2 groups. Nobody comes to court and doesn't say the real full truth. That's tzarich levarer. In which case, Rabbi Meir says, since they're definitely going to bring 2 groups, you can knock out 1 because there's another one. And you're believed because you're not really nogea b'davar, because in the end it won't mainly affect you because he has another 2 witnesses to go against you. Okay, that was that opinion. And then the rabbis say, no. Just because the person said they're going to bring 2 sets of witnesses doesn't mean they're necessarily going to bring 2 sets of witnesses. Right now, there's only 1 in front of us. If you cancel that, maybe there'll be nobody else. And that's because ein tzarich levarer. Now we get to the 4th. Hi'ata Ravin amar Rabbi Yochanan, last words of Kaf Gimel Amud Bed. Reisha be'edim psulim v'dayanim ksherim. Okay, he goes back to the previous section of, he's going to explain also how you can cancel dayanim and explain that in a different way than we thought. Like we thought as long as they're not mumchim, you can cancel them because there's other judges. Now he's going to understand the whole Mishnah differently, the second 2 parts of the Mishnah, the canceling dayanim and canceling edim. Basically, the words are missing here, but I'll explain to you. Okay, you can look at Rashi, also he explains, but I'm a litigant. I came with another witness, and I said, a friend of mine, we both came and said, the judges you chose are disqualified, and the witnesses are disqualified. And we claim, I don't know, they're both robbers, let's say. And then, okay, now, the case where Rabbi Meir says, I can cancel your judges is a case like this. I canceled both. I tried to cancel both. About the witnesses, I was proven right, meaning we found two other witnesses not connected to me at all who corroborated my story and said the witnesses are disqualified. So now we're going to read like this. That's Edim Psulim, where the Edim are 100% Psulim because we have other testimony proving that. Now, since I said two things, I said the judges are disqualified and I said the witnesses are disqualified. And I came with one other witness. So we have two people. Problem is I'm a little nogeh, but once I was proven correct about the witnesses, migo de pasli edim, pasli nami dayani. We're going to believe me about the judges. So again, I made a statement saying the witnesses and the judges were all disqualified. My statement, and with someone else, my statement about the witnesses was proven. So now I'll accept my statement about the judges as well, even without proof, because we work with a migo. Now, migo works in different ways, but migo means mitoch, from the fact that I was proven right about the witnesses will allow me to be proven right about the judges as well without needing outside proof. So that we'll accept my testimony with someone else to cancel your judges. And the seifa, when it says witnesses I can cancel, it's the exact same thing, but the reverse. Where, again, I disqualified both, but this time I brought proof about, or they found proof about the judges. So seifa b'dayanim psulim v'edim kshirim, right? Where, in other words, why are they calling them dayanim psulim v'edim kshirim? I claim they were all psulim, but the only proof was about the judges, not about the witnesses. We found other proof about the judges. The witnesses, there was really no proof, but migo to pasli dayanim pasli nami edim, because I was believed about the judges, will believe me to disqualify the witnesses. That's option 4. Gemara is going to question this as well. Matkifla Rava. Rava is going to come and question it. Bishlam amigo de pasli edim pasli nami dayane. And again, this goes back to our original question, which is, in the case of dayanim, I can get it because you can always bring more judges. So we understand the migo that since I was believed about the witnesses, we could puzzle the judges because we could just go find another court to bring this to. But elamigo de pasli dayane pasli nami edim. But you only have these witnesses. Right? What are you going to do if you don't have these witnesses? If I knock out your witnesses, in the end, what are we doing? It's true we have this migo, which gives me a little more believability. But we're going to let me, with some other person, knock out your witnesses just because I was proven about the judges. We're going to let me knock out your witnesses when ha'edim tuleka, you don't have any other witnesses. So that means that I am what we call no gabadavar. I am directly influencing the result of this court case because you now have no more witnesses. Those were your two witnesses. So, what does the Gemara answer? Based on the last one, oh, well, Ravin must have meant when there's two, again, what's the case? Now we're going back to the previous. Now I want to remind you, the previous answer was Rav Dimi in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. This is Ravin in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan said one or the other. We don't know which one, but now we're going to make them even much more similar because we're going to say that even Ravin thinks that Rabbi Yochanan was talking about a case that the other litigant said they're going to bring two groups of witnesses. That's why if I canceled your dayanim and I canceled your first set of witnesses that actually showed up, will believe me about the witnesses if I was proven about the judges because you have another group of witnesses that can show up. That's why. To which the Gemara answers, okay, so so are you saying that Ravin is saying in the name of Rabbi Yochanan that if there's only one group, then Rabbi Meir thinks you can't cancel the witnesses? If so, Hainu de Rav Dimi. Well, then that's exactly Rav Dimi. Now, this is a bit of a weird question because it's not exactly Rav Dimi, right? And that's what the Gemara is going to answer. But it's in an Ika Beinayu structure. It's not your typical Ika Beinayu because Ika Beinayu is usually, these are really the same, but we're going to find one minor difference. These are really not the same, okay? What's the same about them is that it has to be a case where the other litigant said, I'm bringing two groups of witnesses. But, okay, and I'll already say the difference, but we'll read it inside. But it's really very different because Rav Dimi will say, as long as there's two sets of witnesses, you said you're bringing two sets of witnesses. Rabbi Meir holds, I can be believed to say, come with somebody else, and say that your Eidim are disqualified. But according to Ravin, I can only do that if I also disqualified your judges and I was proven right about your judges by two other external witnesses. So that's a big difference. That's not the same thing. But for whatever reason, the Gemara maybe just wants to highlight that. So the Gemara says, right, so if there's no kad acheret, and Rabbi Meir thinks you can't cancel. Well, then that's exactly the same thing Rav Dimi said, which is it must be a case where there's two groups of witnesses that, the person claimed they were bringing two groups of witnesses. Well, Ika benayu migo. There's a difference between them is the migo, because Mar Savar Amrina migo, Mar Savar Lo Amrina migo. Because Ravin holds we hold by migo. Now this usually we hold by migo means we're going to be lenient and hold by migo. This is actually the opposite. We need amigo. Without amigo, we won't allow this to happen. Okay? Only when there's amigo and you have more reason to be believed will we believe you. And Rav Dimi holds la amrin amigo. No, we don't need amigo. You can be believed even without amigo because you're not no gabe do it at all. Okay, so that was our 4 answers. Now we're going to get off on a total tangent. Gufa. So now we're going back to Reish Lakish, the first answer. And what's going to interest us now is not what Reish Lakish said, but how Reish Lakish said it. Amar Reish Lakish, Pek Kadosh Omar Davar Zeh. Remember he started, he said, no way did Rabbi Meir, this Pek Kadosh, this holy mouth, would utter such a thing of saying, you can cancel witnesses? There's no way he would think that. Today, Edo, change it to single witness. Okay, meaning I don't believe that such a brilliant mind like Rabbi Meir would say such a thing, right? It can't be. He must have said something else. To which the Gemara isn't focused on how he changes Rabbi Meir. It's focused on how he spoke about Rabbi Meir. Ini, could he really have said that in those words? Hamar Ula, didn't Ula say, Haroet Reish Lakish b'Beit Midrash, if you were to see Reish Lakish in the Beit Midrash, Ki'ilu Oker Harim v'Tochanam Zebazeh, you would see someone who's uprooting mountains and knocking them against each other, and, a brilliant, brilliant mind. So how could someone with such a brilliant mind talk about someone else and say, what a brilliant mind? Okay, there's this assumption that Reish Lakish was as great as it gets. So why would he speak with such respect to Rabbi when he himself was, to Rabbi Meir, when he himself was so great? To which Ravina answers, I'm a Ravina, what do you mean? Follow Rabbi Meir b'Beit HaMidrash ki'ilu oker hare harim v'tochanan zebazeh. He was even greater. He would take mountains on mountains and, the mountain above the mountain and knock them against each other. He had even greater analytical skills. So it makes sense. So now they say, Hachikama. This is what we meant to say. Bo re'e kama mechavavim zed. What you can learn from this is also a bit of an atypical use of Hachikama. Usually it's rereading something, not clear if they're rereading what their question was, or maybe they're just pointing out that what we learn from this is how respectful they were one from the other. In other words, here you see how Reish Lakish, who was a brilliant, brilliant scholar, still treated other rabbis who maybe were greater than him, maybe were less great than him. It doesn't matter. He treated them with proper respect. And that's a lesson to be learned. Ki hadi yativ Rebbe. Now we're going to have another similar situation where somebody did this, and it's Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. V'ka'amar asur lahatmina tatzonei. Now he said you can't do hatmana. Hatmana is when you completely wrap something. Okay, on Shabbat you can't completely wrap something hot. Okay, especially if there's some heating element under it. Okay, there's a whole question what you can wrap things in, but you can't because you're going to keep the heat in and make it even hotter. So right, it's insulating things. So Rebbe said you can't even insulate cold things to keep the cold in. Okay, now even though there's no bishul, there's no cooking involved, but what reason did he forbid this? Because he figured if we allow you to insulate cold things, you might think you could insulate hot things. So he forbade that. But Amar the Fanav, Rabbi Rabbi Yossi comes into him and he says, Abba hitir latmina tatzoneh. My father Rabbi Yossi permitted this, so why are you forbidding it? Amar le, so Rabbi says to him, Kfar horezaken. Well, if the elder already taught that it's okay to do this, Rabbi Yossi, then I'll accept that. Now, why is this so such greatness? Maybe Rabbi Yossi was greater than him. Well, Amar Papa bo re'e kama machavavin zetzeh. Papa said from here, this is why we quoted it. This, you see how much they respected each other. Ilu Rabbi Yossi kayam, because if Rabbi Yossi was still alive, hayakafuf v'yoshev lifnei Rebbe. He would be a student before Rebbe. He wouldn't be higher than Rebbe. He would be lower than Rebbe. How do we know this? We know that Rabbi Yishmael filled the place of his father. Okay, meaning he was either as great as his father, maybe even greater than his father. And Rabbi Yishmael, Rabbi Yossi, haya kafuf v'yoshev lifnei Rebbe, and he was a student before Rebbe. So obviously his father would also have been a student before Rebbe. V'ka'amar for horezaken, and look at the respect that Rebbe gave him. That if he permitted it, Rebbe said, "I'm going to permit this as well." Okay, so here you see this beautiful image of the Beit Midrash. How much the rabbis respected each other. However, now we're going to start on a whole sugya that's basically going to be discussing the differences between the rabbis in Israel and the rabbis in Babylonia. Now, note that until now, we've only been talking about rabbis in Israel. And note our whole sugya was all 4 rabbis from Israel. Okay, I don't know if there's a connection here, but I assume there's a connection. Why this whole section is here is a good question. But we're now going to start bashing the Gemara, the rabbis in Babylonia, and start saying how they're not good and they don't treat each other with respect. Now, this is a theme we see in the Bavli a lot. Okay, if you go all the way back to Brachot and the story of Rabbi Yishmael and Rabban Gamliel and how Rabban Gamliel humiliates Rabbi Yoshua, and there's a lot of self-criticism. Right? There's a lot of sugyot in the Bavli that they're criticizing themselves for the way the Batei Midrash are working, the students of Rabbi Akiva, and the whole story about how they killed each other, and they died because they were fighting with each other and they weren't respecting each other. Right, a very appropriate topic for respectful arguing that goes on, unfortunately, too much in our society now. The lack of respectful arguing, and the Bavli is, they're reprimanding themselves really for being this way. Okay, when you see parallel sugyas in the Bavli Yerushalmi, like the story of Rabbi Yishmael, Rabban Gamliel doesn't have that whole element of the problems of the Beit Midrash, because what the scholars claim is that it was a problem going on, the Babylonian Batei Midrash, and therefore when they told the stories, right, even though they're telling stories of Tanaim living in Israel, it doesn't matter, like they're telling stories that are highlighting these issues. So here we have a clear sugya where they're bringing all these negative statements against the Babylonians, and you'll see that a bunch of them are also said in the names of Israeli scholars, which also, might also be, there was a bit of a competition between them, and the Israeli scholars were maybe trying to put them down as well, but so far, right, we saw this idea that, right, how important it is to respect others. So now most of this sugya is going to be based on psukim in Zechariah. Okay, I like what you're saying. I think it was Miriam, although it went too fast for me, but about that perhaps this is here because it's all about leadership, right? And the rabbis, they weren't, like they were the leaders, they were the dayanim, and they're now saying, we have to fix ourselves, right? And this idea about leadership. Yeah, I like that connection. So I'm a Rabbi Yoshaya. My tachtiv ekach li shnei maklot, le'echad karati noam, u'le'echad karati chovlim. Okay, notice he's a scholar in Israel also saying this. So it says, I will take these 2 maklot. It says Zechariah. Okay, we're going to quote, like I said, different random psukim in Zechariah. These 2 sticks, one is called Noam and one is Chovlim. Noam is nice, na'im, pleasant. Chovalim is like attacking, hitting. So Noam, Elu Talmidei Chachamim Sheberetz Yisrael Shemanimim L'zeh L'zeh B'halacha. When they talk about halacha and argue, right, they do it in a pleasant way. Chovalim, Elu Talmidei Chachamim Shebebavel Shemechabelim Zeh L'zeh B'halacha. Okay, they attack each other in halacha. Okay, and they fight about it when they argue. Okay, they have not respectful arguments. Another pasuk, Vayomer, Ela Shnei B'nei HaYitzhar HaUmdim. Okay, now Snayim Zeitim Aleha. Okay, they're quoting 2 different pasukim from chapter 4. One is chapter pasuk 13, and one is I think it's 13 or no, it's 14, and then they go back to pasuk Gimel. Okay, 3. So it's a little out of order, but anyway, first they call them these Bnei Yitzhar. Yitzhar is olive oil, and then it says earlier in the chapter they call them Zeitim, olives. So they also are going to say the same thing. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak. Okay, again, I want to point out, right? Either I want to just suggest that maybe there's 2 possibilities of things going. One is the Babylonians themselves are being self-critical, or if you notice, all the attacks are coming from scholars in Israel, and the scholars in Israel are trying to say. Remember, we talked about how there were always these pulls of who's in charge, and while the center moved to Babylonia, the Israeli rabbis still wanted to maintain their control, and maybe that's why also they were attacking the Babylonians. So why Zeitim and why Yitzhar? Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, Elu Talmidei Chachamim Sheberetz Yisrael. Sorry, Yitzhar. He says, Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, Elu Talmidei Chachamim Sheberetz Yisrael. Shenochim Zeh L'zeh B'halacha Kashem Zayit. Shem Zayit is pleasant, right? They speak pleasantly to each other, right? It flows. Shnayim Zeitim Aleha, right? What are olives? Before you prepare them, they're very bitter. If you ever try to eat a raw olive, Elu Talmidei Chachamim Shebebavel Shemerorerim Zeh L'zeh B'halacha Kezayit. They are embitter each other in halacha when they fight. Okay, it becomes very bitter. Another one, another pasuk from Zechariah. I looked up and I saw this vision. It's a very weird vision. There's these 2 women. Okay, there's a wind in their wings. Okay, and they have wings like the wings of a chasidah. It's a bird. I forget what's the chasidah. The stork, I think. But it comes from we're going to see like we'll see. Vatisa'ena ha'ifa ben hashamayim u'ben haaretz, and they're holding this measure. Yeah, it is a stork. Thank you. They're holding this measure, a measure of something between the heavens and the earth. Va'omar al-malach hadover bi, and I spoke to the angel who was speaking to me. Anahem ha'molichot taifa. Where are they bringing this measure? Vayomer elai livnot labayit be'eretz Shinar. They want to build a house in Shinar. Shinar is Babylonia. Okay, so now the question is, what's going on here? So I just want to point out. Okay, so now we're going to say, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Mishum Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, again, Rabbi Yochanan, right, from Israel. Zo chanufa v'gasut haruach she'yodu leBavel. This is flattery. Okay, this is, Rashi says, Kampeh chasidah is chanufa shemar'im atzmam chasidim. They make themselves look like they're chasidim, okay, when they're not really. He takes it from a chasidah, not a stork, but chasidim, like a chasid, like a righteous person. They're making themselves look like they're righteous people, and gasut haruach, arrogance, right? Because there's two women, each is reflective of one of these character traits. She'yardu leBavel, and he's basically saying, right, all the bad character traits went to Babylonia. Sorry. So now the Gemara says, wait a minute. The Chanufa they'll leave, but the Gasut Ruach Yarad leBavel, Gasut Ruach leBavel Nachi. Did it go to Babylonia? The Hamar Mar, but it was said Asara Kabin Gasut Yardu Lolam. There were 10 measures of Gasut that went into the world. Arrogance. Tish'an Talam Elam ve'echad Kol Olam Kulo. 9 were put in Elam. Elam is where modern day Iran is, and Babylonia is in modern day Iraq. Okay, they're not in the same place. And 1 was by the rest of the world, meaning most of the arrogance is not in Babylonia, it's in Elam. So what did they answer? Well, in the Bavel Nachit, well, in Zechariah, and he saw this image, yes, it went down to Babylonia. But Elam, but then it rolled over to, right, all the way over to Iran, okay, went to Elam. And Ikonami, you can also infer that from the pasuk. Notice it says livnot la bayit, which is build a house for her, not them. There were 2 of them, so only 1 actually built the house in Babylonia. So they only have chanufa and they don't have gasut ruach. Shema mina. Bahar mar, but wait, don't they say siman legasut ruach aniyut? Gasut ruach is poverty. Vaniyut lebavel nachi, and there's a lot of poverty in Babylonia. So maybe arrogance is in Babylonia. So my aniyut Torah. No. Arrogance causes not poverty. It causes loss of Torah. If you're arrogant, then you can't learn Torah properly. And arrogance causes loss of Talmud Torah. And that, obviously, we don't have in Babylonia. Okay, this is a pasuk from Shiur Shirim. We have a young sister who doesn't have breasts. Amar Rabbi Yochanan zo elam, shezachta l'mo v'lo zachta l'lamed. This is elam, and that's the perfect proof. Elam was able to learn, but they were able to learn, but they weren't able to teach. In other words, they had poverty of Torah. They didn't have Torah scholars that could teach, and that's the aniyut that happened on account of their gasut ruach. My Bavel. Okay, now we have these 2 statements about Bavel. Okay, my Bavel. We're going to end with this before we get to the next Mishnah. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, blula b'mikra, blula b'mishnah, blula b'talmud. Okay, why is Bavel called Bavel, right? Bavel is a mix of things because it's a mix of Torah, Mishnah, and Talmud. This is a very famous statement, and there's varying ways to understand the statement. Is this a positive statement about Babylonia? Well, it's very hard to say that in the context of the sugya, especially Rabbi Yochanan, who already had negative things to say, and we're going to see in a minute that Rabbi Meir goes against the Talmud of the Bavli also. So it seems like it's a negative statement, although there are people who say, oh, the Bavli is great, it has everything in it. It's got a mix of everything. So, in fact, Tosfot says, from here, Rabbeinu Tam says, Potrim atzmeinu, the first Tosfot on the page, you should split your years into 3, divide into 3. Shlish b'mikra, a third of Torah, a third of Mishnah, a third of Talmud. Just learn the Bavli, okay? PR for Daf Yomi, learn that, you get everything. You don't have to focus on Mishnah, focus on Torah. No, you get everything in Daf Yomi, okay? And learning. He points out, though, and this is just interesting because it shows how it shows how our tefillot somewhat developed. These are 3 things in the siddur, right? There's Karbono, where we say, right, we bring the Parashat Tamid from the Torah, then we go through the Mishnayot of Ezehu Mekoman Shel Tzlachim, and then we read Rabbi Shmuel Omer, which is a Braita, which is more like the Talmud. So he says we still do a third, and there's like a section in that in our in our tefillot that we do. Okay, we also do it after Birkat Torah in the morning, same thing. So people say that that's like a remnant of a different, like there were two versions of Birkat Torah and they both ended up in the davening. Anyway, that's a whole other share. But the point is, that seems like a very positive thing. But there are commentaries that say, no, this is negative. It's a mix of everything. And people don't end up learning any one thing because it's just got everything in it. And people aren't taking the time to learn Torah properly and learn Mishnah properly and then learn Gemara, right? There's like stages. And anyway, for people who start Daf Yomi and didn't do all that, don't worry. It doesn't mean you're all wrong, okay? But there's different ways. But you can see there's a machloket about it. And certainly in the context, it would seem that's a negative thing. Okay, next. B'machshakim hoshivani kimetei olam. Okay, this is a big negative statement. Machshakim means you put me in darkness, right? Like the dead people in this world. I'm a Rabbi Yirmiyah zet Talmudah shel Bavel. Okay, anti-PR for Daf Yomi. The Talmud Bavli is the worst. Okay, Rabbi Yirmiyah, remember him. Okay, besides he was a nudnik and he got kicked out of the Beit Midrash and then brought back in. But more than that, he started in Babylonia and he moved to Israel. As opposed to all these other rabbis that lived in Israel only and were kind of shooting arrows at the Babylonians, he actually came from them. And he's saying they got it the worst. Like they're really, he knows from the inside. And he says their Talmud's all confusing. And like I was telling someone recently, he was trying to tell me, you should teach Yerushalmi next because Yerushalmi's like much more, it's a little easier to follow. There's not so many different opinions and shakla v'tarya. It's a little simpler. It's more like learning Mishnah Brura and Halacha, and it's a little more clear cut. And that's kind of what Yirmiyah is saying. Right? The Bavli is just confusing, right? Like mivul bal, okay? And it's darkness, you get it and you just don't know where you're going. So anyway, it's very interesting sugya to learn. I hope it doesn't deter you from continuing to learn. Okay, moving now to the next Mishnah. Amar lo, ne'eman alai abba, ne'eman alai avicha, ne'emanim alai shlosha ro'ei bakar. I mentioned this a little bit yesterday, but now we're going to show you the two sides. Rashi says we're talking about judges. If I say your father could be a judge or my father could be a judge, okay, no, or three Ro'ei Bakar who, like the Ro'ei Bakar, were not knowledgeable people. They lived out in the fields. They didn't know anything. But I said, I don't mind if they judge us. Then Rabbi Meir or Meir Yachol Lachzor Bo, Chachamim or Meir Yachol Lachzor Bo. Again, we see Rabbi Meir's approach, like you can just go back on your word. It doesn't matter, okay? It wasn't such a serious acceptance. You said it, you can go back, you can renege. The rabbi said, what do you mean? You accepted it. So Rashi says we're talking about judges, and we're going to see, we already quoted this line in the Gemara yesterday, but we're going to quote it again. It means 1 out of 3. It doesn't mean one judge to be over everybody. It means 1 out of 3. And Rashi's, okay, so we'll get back there in a minute. Rashi thinks it's judges. Rabbi Yochanan says it's the case of Abba, okay, Shlosha Bakar is obviously judges, but the case of Abba is 1 of 2 of the witnesses. Okay, I'll accept the father be a witness. Okay, so he thinks it's talking about witnesses and judges. Okay, there's a whole machloket here. I'm not going to get you into it right now, but the other thing that's important to understand is, first of all, what is Abba and what is Avicha? Okay, I always struggle with this. I never really knew. I get your father, I don't mind, but my father, I don't mind. But it seems a little weird. Why am I talking about my father? So I tried looking around to try to get an explanation of this. Safrai claims that it's a case where I agree to have your father testify, but you agree to have my father testify for me. In other words, we each agree to let Ne'eman alai Am and Ne'eman alai Avicha as one case. It's where we each agree that, okay, your father could testify for you and my father could testify for me. That was an interesting interpretation. That made a lot of sense to me. Anyway, it's a bit of a question. Why the Abba case? In other words, my father. What's the uniqueness that I accept my father? You have to accept my father because it's related to me. Anyway, that's a good question. So in these cases, Rabbi Meir said you could change your mind. The rabbis say not. Now, one interesting thing here, okay, we'll get to it in a minute, actually. I'll wait 1 minute. The Mishnah now says another case. What happens if there's one witness that says, my computer is really yours, okay? It's in my house, it's yours. And one witness comes and says, yeah, it's really yours, not mine. Now, according to Halacha, one witness is enough to make me obligated to take an oath. And then I have to take a Torah oath, which means with the Sefer Torah, I have to say God's name. So if I'm supposed to take that oath, and Amar lo, dor li I owe you an oath. Va'amar lo, dor li and you say, listen, I don't mind if you don't take the Torah oath. Just say, I swear on my life. Okay, or I swear on my head. Rabbi Meir says, again, you're accepting something that's lighter than what normally would be accepted. It's not as harsh. You could change your mind and say, no, I want you to take a Torah oath. And the rabbis say, no, you can't. You already accepted. So comes Rav Dimi. I'm Rav Dimi, Bereid Rav Nachman, Bereid Rav Yosef. Kigon de kiblei alei b'chad. So he says it's in the case where this was one of two witnesses or one of three judges. Okay, not that you said okay. And there Rashi says, what's the chiddush here? That even then, right? Even though there's let's say two other good judges, Rashi says still Rabbi Meir says you can be choser bo, and that's the chiddush according to Rashi of this line. That even though there's two out of three kosher judges, and therefore maybe you would say, it's established, you already accepted that, right? Rabbi Meir still says you can change your mind. Tosfot says something totally different, which is just interesting. And again, we don't have a lot of time to go in depth, but I want to just get to these nice points, which is Tosfot says what he means is it's dafka chidush for chachamim. And what it's saying is it's only when you can't change your mind when there's one thing going wrong, meaning there's a relative. But if you accepted the relative to be the judge for the whole case without any other judges with him, or one witness to be like two. So you have two things, he calls it tarta l'reuta, two things going against, meaning you accepted number one, a father, and you accepted that the father be the only witness or the only judge. Then even the rabbis think you can be choser bo, because that's so weak, right? That it allows you to always be choser bo. And that's a machlok at Rashi Tosfot. Rashi wouldn't say that because that's not what Rashi. Anyway, it's an interesting machlok, but we're going to move on. Because the whole question is, what's he adding here? Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Now we're going to have a big debate. What case are they arguing? Now there's two types of cases. We're having a monetary argument. And you say, right, either, okay, let's say I'm accepting your father to be the judge over us. I'll trust him. But trust him to what? Either the case is that I think you owe me money, but if your father says I don't owe you the money, then okay, I'll let it go. That's like an easier case, right? If it's a case where I think you owe that I owe you money, and I'll say, well, if your father says I owe you the money, then I'll pay you, and I'm going to have to actually take money out of pocket and give you the money. That's much less likely that I agree to that kind of thing. You understand? Because etan lachaz is requiring much more of me. So Rabbi Yehuda says in the name of Shmuel, machloket b'machulacha. The machloket is in a case where I'm just saying, fine, status quo will remain if your father rules against me. Like, I'll leave it and I won't force you to pay me the money. Because that's just saying, okay, I won't get something. That's easier. And that's when they have an argument. But if I said, if your father rules against me, I'll pay you the money. Everyone agrees to of course I could change my mind about it because I didn't really agree that your father was going to, I said your father could rule. I didn't really believe he was going to go against me. And if I think things are going now, we didn't talk yet about it. And someone asked us after class yesterday, at what point could we change our mind? Okay, we're going to get to that later. But at some point, at least, we think I could change my mind because it requires much more of me to actually commit to doing that. But Rabbi Yochanan Rabbi Yochanan said, what are you talking about? The machloket. So now, what doesn't Rabbi Yochanan say? Is it also machloket mechulacha? Okay, and that's going to be the Gemara's question. What would they say? Does he think everyone agrees? Everyone agrees in mechulacha. You can't change your mind because right? That's one possibility for Rabbi Yochanan. If the machloket is lacha, maybe in mechulacha everyone will agree that you can't change your mind because you obviously agreed to that because it's just leaving the status quo. Or maybe he thinks the machloket's in both cases. So Tashma, let's learn from here. To Amarava, machloket be'etain l'chav, mechulacha divrei hakol en yachol lachzor bo. Rava says specifically the machloket in etain l'chav, which sounds like Rabbi Yochanan, and then he says specifically, but in mechulacha everyone agrees. So therefore, we're going to assume that that's what Rabbi Yochanan said, that the machlok is only in the mechulacha. Everyone would agree. Rava Damar Rabbi Yochanan. The Rava would fit perfectly with Rabbi Yochanan. But if you say the machlok is in both cases according to Rabbi Yochanan, then Rava doesn't fit with the first one, who said the opposite, and he doesn't fit with Rabbi Yochanan, who said the machlok is in both cases. So it doesn't make sense. Rava would have to fit in with somebody. So Gemara says, what do you mean? Of course he doesn't. Rava Tama Dinashe Kamar. Rava could be saying a third opinion. In other words, it's very possible that Rabbi Yochanan thinks the machlok is across the board. And Rava thinks it's not. Okay, and then we have three possibilities. Is the machloket in mechulacha, but etain lecha, everyone agrees you could change your mind. Is the machloket in etain lecha, but in mechulacha, everyone agrees you could change it, and you can't change your mind. Or is the machloket in both? And that's how the Gemara concludes that it's possible there's three opinions. But now they have a problem with Rav. Rav says the homachlokas in a everybody agrees that if it's just leaving status quo, you obviously agreed and therefore you can't change your mind, even Rabbi Meir. What's the problem? Well, Shvua, how did I explain Shvua? The classic Shvua is I claim my computer's mine, and you say, what do you mean? The computer in your possession is mine, and you're trying to get it out of me. And then I have to take an oath. Now, my oath is to keep status quo, that I don't have to give it to you, right? Or 1 second. No, sorry. The the Shvua would be that you would, sorry, shvua nishba ve'ino b'shalim. Right. It would just be that things would stay status quo. I would take the oath and not have to pay. Now, if you, I just confused it because I put who is you and me, but if you said, Dor li b'chaya roshcha, right? I'll let you take a minor oath to keep status quo, right? What did we say in the Mishnah? That's a mechulacha case. And there's a machloket. So Rava doesn't make sense because he said mechulacha, there is no machloket. And that's what we're going to read right now. But they have a machloket. My love. Now, starting with Amud Bet, is this not botan and nishbein v'lo m'shamim? Since the standard shvua is, I would just take that oath and say the computer's mine and I don't have to pay, which would basically mean machulacha, because you're saying I'm willing to accept some lower level shvua, and we see they have a machloket. And Rava said machulacha, everyone agrees, since it's just retaining status quo, you must have agreed and you can't change your mind. So, right, to have a like a machulacha, to which the Gemara says, lo, it must be talking about, even though it's not the standard shvua, and there's only unique cases where this happens, and that's why it's a bit of a weak answer. But lo ba'otana nishba'im v'notlim. It must be a case where, like, for example, let's say that was the case, and I claim the computer's mine, but I'm a person who lied once before, and I'm like they suspect me, and they won't let me take the oath, so they'll let you take the oath to get the computer. Okay, we'll swap the oath, and instead of me, you'll do it. And that's what they're saying must be the case. And then it's a case where I said, well, I'm willing to let you take the computer if you take this lower level oath. And then it would be to have it like a lecha. That's more like a lecha, and then that would work. So now the Gemara says, but wait, if we're saying the machloket of the first part of the Mishnah is a lecha, and then we're saying the machloket in the second part of the Mishnah is a lecha, we're back to the question we had yesterday, which is v'hatana lereisha. But we already learned that in the reisha. You don't need two. What's the difference whether it's an oath or it's I'll let your father be the judge? What's the difference? Okay, so why do we need both cases? So they say no. Tana tole b'dat acherim v'tana tole b'dat atzma. They're two different ones because again, when I agree that you could take that kind of oath, or I agree that you can have your father be the judge or a witness, one is tole b'dat acherim. I don't know what your father's going to say. Your father might rule like me. Your father might rule like you. I really have no idea. Just because your father doesn't mean he's definitely going to rule like you. Okay? He might be an honest person and just rule honestly. But if I say you really want the computer, so take an oath about it, I can assume you're going to take that oath, especially if I'm giving you a light oath that's not like with God's name or anything. So that's tolebedat atzmo. It's a little tricky. Atzmo usually means himself. Here it means the other person. He's toleb on the dot of the other person. So let's just think about it. Okay, so it's tzricha. Itana tolebedat acherim, that I didn't know where it was going to go, so maybe I didn't really commit to saying no matter what they say, because I was hoping he was going to rule like me. Rabbi Meir so then Rabbi Meir would say you could change your mind. Mishum delo gamar umakde, because I wasn't really serious about it. This goes back to all the things, right? Like at the end of Baba Batra, we talked about this, all about deciding, did you really mean to pass this on to the other person? Did you really mean that you're willing to accept this or not? Because you said, I don't know that he's necessarily going to go like you. But if I said, fine, take the shvua, take the oath, well then, maybe the Rabbi Meir agrees with the Rabbanan. I knew you were going to take the oath. What? I thought you weren't going to take the oath. I was willing to give up. By agreeing to that, I already gave up my rights, in which case I can't change my mind. And on that same logic, if we started with tolebedat atzmo, with the oath, you would say Baha Kamri Rabbanan. That's the case with rabbis say you can't change your mind. Aval Bahahi Emamodele Rabbanan the Rabbi Meir. But you might have thought in the other case the rabbis agreed with Rabbi Meir, right? Where you're Tolebedat Achirim, the guy was never really intended, and therefore it's Shricha. That's why we need both cases. Now we're going to get to the really important question, which is at what stage can you change your mind? Okay, after they already decide, like I'm after the case, I say, I don't mind if your father judges. Your father judges us, and then I say, oh, well, he ruled against me. Okay, I want to change my mind. You think Rabbi Meir says it even after? Well, let's see. Amar Reish Lakish, machloket lifnei gemar din. Okay, so Reish Lakish says, now, obviously the debate is before there's a decision. Once there's a decision, obviously everyone agrees you can't change your mind. However, comes Rabbi Yochanan and he says, Rabbi Yochanan Amar, lachar gemar din machloket. The machloket is actually after gemar din. And again, just like Rabbi Yochanan in Etain Lecha, he didn't say what about before gemar din. So again, the question comes. Does he think the machloket's across the board in both cases? They have a machloket, or does he think that before Gemar Din everybody agrees you can change mind? Even the rabbis say you can't. That's only after Gemar Din, but maybe before Gemar Din you could. So Tashma da Amar Rava, we do the same thing we did last time, but you're going to see it's not the same. Last time, what did we do? We brought exactly what Rava said. What's the machloket about? And then we said, well, Rava must hold like one of them, so it must be Rabbi Yochanan. It must be this is telling us about Rabbi Yochanan. And then we said, no, Rava could be saying his own opinion. In this case, it's a little different. They're going to bring Rava, but they're not going to bring what he holds about the machloket. They're going to bring what he paskins. And because they bring what he paskins, and he doesn't have an opinion about what their machloket is, like a theoretical opinion, since it's not like a Parshanut opinion, how do we understand this Mishnah? We're assuming that he doesn't have his own unique opinion and he must be holding like Rabbi Yochanan. And then we're going to prove what Rabbi Yochanan actually does hold, and they're going to conclude it here, different than the other case. So Rava says, Kibel alav karov o pasul, if you accepted someone who was a relative or disqualified witness to be anyway, or a judge, lifnei gemar din yachol lachzor bo, lachar gemar din einu yachol lachzor bo. Now before the gemar din, you can change your mind. After the Gemara Din, you can't change your mind. Now remember, he's paskening. We don't know what he thinks about the machloket. But Rashi explains to us that we're assuming he goes like the rabbis because the rabbis are the mainstream opinion and Rabbi Meir is an individual opinion. So if he holds like the rabbis, if Rabbi Meir held that after Gemara Din is the machloket, but lifnei Gemara Din divrei kol yachol lachzor bo, before Gemara Din you could, then Rava fits in perfectly with Rabbi Yochanan, aliba de Rabbanit. Rava holds like the rabbis, according to Rabbi Yochanan's opinion, because listen to what he says. Go back. Before Gemar Din, you can change your mind. That's the rabbis. After Gemar Din, everyone agrees that you can't change your mind anymore, right? And that's, before Gemar Din, you could change it. Sorry, I said it wrong. After Gemar Din is where there's a machloket. And what does he say? Because that's the rabbis. Before Gemar Din, everyone agrees you can change your mind, and that's why he holds you can change your mind. And the only way to say that was to say that the rabbis agree in the case of before Gemar Din. Otherwise, right? If you said the machloket is across the board, then he's zigzagging, right? Rav is saying before Gemar Din, yes, you can change your mind. After Gemar Din, you can't change your mind. If they disagree in both cases, he's not like Rabbi Meir, he's not like the rabbis, right? Rav Damar Kamani doesn't fit, and therefore it must be the machloket is only after Gemar Din and before Gemar Din. Even rabbis agree you could change your mind. That's very radical, right? To say that you can change your mind even after they decide. Very radical. Okay, that's Rabbi Yochanan's opinion, how we've assumed Rabbi Yochanan holds. Now, Shalach le Rav Nachman bar Rav Chisda. Now we just want to know, really, like, how do we paskin? We had all these theoretical discussions. So he asked, Rav Nachman bar Rav Chisda asked Rav Nachman bar Yaakov, Yelamdeinu Rabin, which case is the machloket? And who do we paskin like? Exactly as we saw Rava paskin, it's only after Gemar Din and like the rabbis. Before Gemar Din, everyone agrees you could change your mind. Rav Ashi, so after Gemar Din, you can't change your mind, okay? Even though, and what's radical is the Rabbi Meir allows it, even after Gemar Din, right? The rabbis aren't no, the rabbis think you can change your mind before, but you can't change your mind after. But Rabbi Meir is the really radical opinion. Again, it shows how radical Rabbi Meir is across the board. Pasul Edim, Pasul, right? Even after Gemar Din, okay, but you could change your mind. So that's the way we hold, but we don't hold like Rabbi Meir, but it is, that is what he holds. So then they say, Rav Ashi Amar Hachi Shalach. He says, no, the question was this. Right? What was the machloket about? Because we didn't have a psikat halacha there. Halacha kedivrei mi. Shalach le be'etein lecha machloket halacha kedivrei chachamim. Okay, the machloket is an etein lecha is if the money is going to transfer hands, then they have a debate. And we pass like the chachamim that you can't change your mind. Surah, they explained it the way we just did, but in Pumbedita, they said it differently, which is a different question. Amar Rabbi Chanina bar Shlemi Yashalchu Lemibei Rav Lishmuel. And the house of Rav sent to Shmuel. This was after Rav died. He died before Shmuel. The Beit Midrash of Rav used to send questions to Shmuel that they didn't know because Rav was no longer there. Yilamdenu Rabbeinu, can you teach us Lifnei Gemar Din v'kanu miyad omai? A different question. What if it was before Gemar Din, but which we just said everyone agrees it's fine, right? You could change your mind, but they did a kinyan. Okay, this reminds us of all the things we learned in the Bavas, right? If you do a kinyan, you show seriousness of purpose. Shalach le lehu, he sent back to them. Ein lachar kinyan klum. Once you do a kinyan, you can't change your mind. Okay, so this is all if you didn't do any sort of kinyan. Okay, new Mishnah. Ein luheina psulim. Now we're going to get to all the psulei edut. Psulei edut are people who suspect that they might take money, right, to lie falsely. You could bribe them. Okay, they're bribable people. Why are they bribable people? Because they're obsessed with money. How do we know they're obsessed with money? Well, misachek b'kubiyah. Okay, what's wrong with a misachek b'kubiyah? Tries to make quick money, right? So likewise, you might lie falsely. Milaveh b'ribi. You loan money on interest, right? It's forbidden by the Torah law, but you do it anyway because you want to make money. Mafrichei yonim, which we're going to have a debate in the Gemara what this is. So I'll leave it for now. So chalei shvi'it, people who sell shemitah produce, it's forbidden to do, and you do it anyway. Again, you don't want to lose out money. Amar Rabbi Shimon, this is a very unclear statement. We're going to get to it on Daf Kafav and explain it. B'tchila yukorin len otanos shvi. First, they call them collectors of shemitah produce. Misha Rabu Anasim, when there were all these bad people who took things from others, chazru l'kotan socharei shvi. They then started calling them those who did business with the shemitah produce. Okay, we don't understand this. We'll leave it aside right now. Amar Rabbi Yehuda. Yehuda goes back to the beginning. The misachek b'kubiyah. Now, what's wrong with a gambler? So I explained the gambler is someone who is trying to make quick money, right? Which would mean anyone who goes to a casino perhaps could be pasulei edut. But comes Rabbi Yochanan and says, "Hey, matai, when though? Bisman she'en lahem umanut elahu. It's only if that's your only job. Aval yesh lahem umanut shelahu ksherim. But if they have another job, it's fine. Okay, if you go to a casino once in a while, but you have a real job, we're not worried you're going to take money falsely." Misachek b'kubiyah ma'ikabit. So the Gemara says, what's wrong with this misachek b'kubiyah? So we're going to have a machloket. Amarami Barchama, Mishum to have a asmachta. Asmachta lo kanya. Okay, we talked about this asmachta sugya. Unfortunately, we're at the very end of daf and we're over time. So I'll do this very quickly. But basically, there's many opinions what asmachta is. We've had this before. But what's asmachta? What's about asmachta? Well, like we were talking about before, when I go to a casino, I don't intend to lose. Otherwise, why would I go? So I go, I put my money down on the table. I expect to get it back, which means if someone else picks up my money because they won and I lost, they're stealing money. So anyone who goes in is basically a thief because they're taking something that's not yours. Asmachta lo kanya means if I didn't really intend to lose my money, then when you take it, you don't really intend to gain my money. So if I win at a casino, I'm a thief. So anyone who goes into a casino is basically taking stolen. They're basically thieves. They take stolen money. Rav Sheshet Amar Kol ki agavna lav asmachta. That is not asmachta. Okay? That is not asmachta. Why? Because, okay, now here, there are many different opinions. Tosfot explains, I think it's, if I remember, what's asmachta? Asmachta is when I say, I promise to work your land. If I don't work it, I'll pay you b'meitav. I'll give you, like I'm a sharecropper, I'll give you as if I worked the land. Now, in that case, I can control, right, the result. I can decide to work it or not to work it. I never really intended to not work it. So I never really intended to give you a full year's produce if I don't do anything. I was just saying it as like, I promise I'm going to do a good job. And then I don't really mean it. But when I go to a casino, I'm willing to take that risk. I don't mind losing my money because I'm hoping I'm going to win more money. So I'm willing to put that money down in the hope that I'll get more. And then you're not a thief at all. So what's the problem then with a gambler? Because you're not doing real things to the world, right? You're doing nothing with your life. Okay, but that's only if you have no other job. Okay, and now we're going to go back to the Mishnah. So my benayu, if you have another profession, then it's fine, right? You go to a casino once in a while, it's okay. So Tnam, question on Rami Barchama. Rabbi Yehuda comes at the end of the Mishnah. They're going to assume that Rabbi Yehuda is explaining Tanakama, not arguing with him. Explaining. He says it's only if you have no other job. That sounds just like Rav Sheshet, Rami Barchama. And that raises a problem with Rami Barchama. With that, we're going to end. Okay, I'll do a super fast review. We did the fourth opinion of the Eidim, how you can apostle Eidim, and from there even how you can apostle Dayanim, we had a new interpretation of. Then we went to this sidetrack about the Babylonians versus the Israeli rabbis. Then we got back to the mission, Ne'eman alai Abba, Ne'eman alai Avicha, and the Shlosha Bakar, and the Tvua also. And we had a big debate, is it Machul Lecha, Eten Lecha? Is it lifnei gmardin la'achar gmardin? And then we had the psule edut. With that, we end for today. Wishing everyone a Shabbat Shalom and have a good fast.